We're getting ready to start my interactive lecture. And in my lecture, you'll have many slides with your teacher talking about information from the book, your electronic book, and information that I'm going to add to the course. You will also have several videos, some of them lengthy, that you need to watch. This will all be held, you will be held accountable for all this information for the test. Please make sure that you answer all the practice quiz questions in this lecture. It'll help you. The internet is a worldwide collection of networks and millions of links, and business governments are on there. Everybody's put together with websites and email, and now we have the Web 0.20 that are people interacting. We've got Facebook, we've got everything. But it is a connection of many networks put together. You need to also understand, when we get to the video about data brokers, this is a tool for advertisement. So you really need to be careful of what information you're sharing out there, because people are collecting this information and then again turning it around and selling to others. Well, the ARPANET is really how the internet got started. Many years ago, it was set up for scientific information. If you see that graphic down below, it says 1969. It starts out there and it grows out there. But it was really for military and information about secrets. We were very concerned in 1969 about a military attack of nuclear type. About 3 more slides, you'll see a video about the history of the internet. We set that up to basically, if one site went down, they can still communicate with each other. That was the goal. Allow scientists to share physical locations. It didn't matter where it was, but they can communicate. And that was the original 4 right there. You see UCLA and UCSB and Utah. But they were very concerned that if one of the nodes got broken or blown up or whatever happened, they still wanted to share information. So the ARPANET started out as a military, grew into the National Science Foundation, which again you'll see a video. I don't want to ruin it for you because it's actually a pretty good one. And as that grew, eventually it was turned over to the public. And look what we've done with it now. I don't know if it's good or bad, but we've grown into this huge body. I love this timeline because you can see the 1969 ARPANET, and then they evolved into Ethernet and FTP and TCP/IP, which we're going to talk about as we get going here. And then you're going to see the World Wide Web as we get going. I remember 1990, I think it was about 1993, I was on it big time, making web pages, making sites. You see that Netscape, which really doesn't exist that much anymore, really in its original form. Yahoo came about. iTunes was a huge deal. Google, almost about 1999. MySpace, boy, I might have a MySpace site still out there that's just decomposing. Bing, YouTube. This is like a history of the internet, of where we've gone since the internet was turned over to the public. So the next video, please take notes. This is a big deal. This next video that you're going to see about its history and where it went. Hopefully you took time to watch that history of the internet, and we're going to touch a little bit on TCP/IP in a couple of slides. But once we got the internet, they don't have control of it. The Worldwide Consortium, or the W3C, oversees it, but it's much like NATO. So if you wanted to start some new code or you wanted to embed it, really all you have to do is get a browser company to really rebel and say, sure, we'll include this. Because technically they could. They have standards they try to adhere to the standards of W3C, but really there's no power. These browser companies are the ones that have the power. So if you look at the question, let's say there's an internet test on the question, a question on the test that says, who's responsible for the internet. Really, it's nobody, but W3C oversees and sets guidelines and standards. Who enforces the standards and guidelines? Nobody. All right, this could be quite a lengthy lecture on this slide, but here we go. We're looking, see the envelope there, it says, my IP address is a number. And the number of the IP address is usually between 254 and 0. So it could be 254.254.254.254, or it could be 0.0.0. It has to be within those range, 254 to 0. and they have to be separated by 4. We're not going to get into IP6, so don't worry about it. It's IP4. That's the standard we're using in most situations right now. So this is 192.168.1.1. That's the IP address. And we talked earlier, you watched a video when it talked about the history of the internet, the Clovis network and all this other stuff that came about. We still use this, the TCP IP address, so that we know where things are delivered. It's much like your zip code. So if you have a zip code and you put something in the mail with your address, it's going to go to your house because it's unique to you. Well, each computer has a unique ID within their area, which we call an IP address. Now, the funny thing is, everybody goes, I've never heard of an IP address. You can find it by going into your DOS prompt, but that's not part of this class. However, your computer is using your IP address all the time, and domain names. So we're talking now a little bit about the domain name system. They have IP addresses. Your web server does, but we buy domain names. So we buy www.naborshood.com. Well, I buy that through GoDaddy. Well, all GoDaddy does is they put that information, I buy it, and they put it in like a little table. And then they ask me, what is your web server where I'm going to put my web pages at? What is that IP address? And then I state it, and they write that down. So it says naborshood.com automatically gets resolved as IP address 1.1.1.1. So when you go to your browser and you type in naborshood.com, it automatically, the second you hit enter, it looks at those conversion tables that Google put out there, and they start replicating all over the internet. And it says naborshood.com or naborshood.org, or whatever I have, is 1.1.1. So at that point, your computer and the network never recognizes the domain name. It's gone. That is for the human purposes, okay? So it's gone, and it's out there. So that's really what Google or all these domain names where you can buy domain names, that's all they do is they tie your domain name, if it's available or if you buy it, to an IP address of a web server that has information. And so then they put those on tables and they replicate it. So your IP address on web servers, on business, everywhere you see this private and public image right there, everybody has an IP, and right now we have 4 digits, and I talked about that earlier, the 192.168.1.1. We're going to an IP6, which is going to have 6 eventually, but for this class, just know that you have to have 4 separated. It's 256 to 0. Each one can be between there, and they can be duplicates. Okay, usually 256.256.256 or 0.0.0.0 are saved for the servers. But again, that's a little bit too much information. So if you look at your domain name, let's go to the bottom corner there, and it says the subdomain is www. And then your domain name is, in this example, is example. And then your top level domain name is .com or .org or whatever you selected. The HTTP or the FTP, which you'll learn later at the very end of this chapter, is the protocol identifier. The funny thing is the subdomain, the www, can be changed because you could have docs.example.com that still stays the same server. Okay, so you do need to know those parts, the subdomain, the domain name, and the top level domain name, and know that you can buy your domain name at companies that will sell them to you. And there's a whole plethora of top level domain names, from ed to com to business to whatever. Domain names, again, from the last slide, are the last part, the com, the net, and the ed. And you buy those. You know, there's a whole bunch of retailers out there that you can buy it from. And I'm just talking about a popular one that you see on advertisements. But GoDaddy originally started, selling domain names. But the top level domain name, you can register it, as you see from the graphic there. There's resellers that will resell them to you, but they all get put into the ICANN, who kind of oversees it. And then from there, the ICANN then passes the domains into the register operator. Basically, it's the yellow pages of the internet so that you can find things. And then from there, the nonprofit, the ICANN part of it, manages the whole system. I put a button down here. It's a link to a whole bunch of different top-level domain names. That's the end part. Because it used to be just net, org, com, but now and the ed and the military and the gov. but we've added a whole bunch, and it's amazing how much they're adding every day. The only two that I know of, the Gov and the Ed, are the ones you have to prove that you are either a government agency, and the military too. The military, government, and education, you have to prove to get those top-level domain names. And why am I telling you this? If you go to a website that doesn't have like an educational website or college, an online college, and it doesn't have a .ed, and you ask about it and it doesn't have a .ed, most likely they haven't been accredited. So you have to be accredited to get a .edu. So that might help you when you're looking at future plans for some online colleges and stuff like that. But look at this graphic, go over it, click on the link that says, link to different top-level domain names. Look what's out there. Okay, in this little domain system area, we've talked about domain names, IP, and now we're talking about a domain server. Basically, it's the resolver. It does the translation of the association between the IP address and the name. So the graphic does a really good job here. If you look, it says, it looks at domain.org, and it starts asking the root servers, the organizational service, and even the farther out IP server saying, hey, what's up? Don't forget that IP stands for Internet Service Provider. That's in your book. Hopefully you've got that down there too. But it goes through this whole process, step 1, step 2, step 3, and it tries to resolve your query or you're looking for a certain domain name. The video right after this does a good job of explaining it in more detail. Getting on the internet is not too difficult. You first have to sign up with an internet service provider. And that internet service provider is going to provide you with access. If you look at the picture, it talks about connecting through a modem into your server, and then bam, you're out and ready to go. There are local internet service providers. There's regional and there's national. An example of a national would be something like Comcast or an AT&T. Something that is regional or local, like Sierra Tel. We used to have a long time ago, I'm dating myself here, CVIP used to be a local one out of Fresno State. There's also a thing called an online service provider. It's basically a generic term for anybody who's providing multiple services, let's say web and discussion and forum, and sometimes they do allow you to connect to the internet through them. American Online was a big one in the early days. They also have Prodigy from way back when, but it's coming back now because Facebook would like to provide this for you, and so would Google here real soon. Keep you on their site so they can keep their data and keep it private so they can then turn around and sell it or use it again. The World Wide Web is, like we talked earlier, the internet, but the World Wide Web is a collection of web pages. And I think the graphic on that screen right now does a good job of how it branches off from a nucleus and keeps moving out. A website is basically kind of like a collection of similar pages. So if I have an educational website for my online classes, I would have all things similar to online classes that I'm teaching. So we have websites, or web, basically a collection of all this data. A website is a narrowed focus, usually pursuant to a certain organization or place or a thing. Let's say my educational website. And then the server is basically the thing that holds my pages, because really websites that come in your browser, they're actually like Word docs, but they're HTML docs that you create and you bring them into the browser, and only the browser can read the language that they produce, which we call HTML, hypertext markup language. Not necessary right now, but so the World Wide Web is composed of the big forest is the World Wide Web, and the trees get down to the specific site, and then the server is what holds it. It's like the root of the tree. If you were a recent graduate from high school the last couple of years, most likely you've grown up with a web browser on a computer all your life. There's many browsers out there, and there will be continuing to be more browsers added. Right now we're using, Safari, Opera, Firefox, Internet Explorer, and Chrome. And you can see the icons on there. Please take some time and watch this video that's going to come up. You need to click on it to make it happen. It talks about, the common threads within browsers. What you're seeing here is how browsers from the year 2009 have exploded across the globe and where their popularity, everything from when Firefox took over to Chrome's popularity to when Opera started to die out. Very interesting graphic. Real important in nowadays terms and technology is cache. It's spelled C-A-C-H-E, and basically it's a way to store things. It'll be a repetitive thing throughout this whole entire class, but what we're going to do here is we're going to start looking at browser cache. Browser cache is the ability to basically store HTML files or CSS files within a special area so they can grab a hold of it easily. They don't have to re-download it. Okay, so your browser kind of says, hey, you go to this page a lot, these images come down, let me cache it. Sometimes you can also write it into if you see the figure down there, if you're running some higher level scripting, you can embed it into your ASP and PHP pages where it'll cache it, or how long you can cache it, everything from a JavaScript to images. So that way when you hit that web page, it loads quicker because it's already stored on your computer. The next slide, after you're done reading this information about browser wars, is going to be an in-depth video about the browser wars and what was going on in the 2000s between Internet Explorer and everybody else, and what happened. Microsoft ended up winning the browser war with Internet Explorer. By the way, they're getting rid of Internet Explorer. There's going to be a whole new browser put out by Microsoft here. And all the evolution, it's because your browser is what you use to get on to buy things. And remember, I've been telling you this, and you've watched the data broker video hopefully already. The internet is a marketing tool. Don't ever forget that. And we don't have the certain bells and whistles. We use a browser to get in there to buy things and the security. And so browsers are a big deal when it comes to companies and what's going on. The URL is basically what shows up in the top of your browser when you click in and go in to search the internet. And you see on the image there, I think it's a very good image. It basically talks about the protocol, the subdomain, the domain name, like you can buy at GoDaddy, the top level domain name, you still register there. And then it talks like everything after the .com or .ed or .whatever. You have an index.php. That's an actual file that exists on the web server. So remember, goes all the way back to TCP/IP. Your web server has an IP address, and that server then says, okay, this IP address is attached to this folder, and then you can build away everything you want in there. Put your files in there, your index, HTML, whatever you want to. And then it breaks down. It talks about the extensions which in there, and that this is a CGI parameters and some ASP and PHP stuff. But all that stuff that goes in there where it says 7, that goes to querying information within the web page. Okay? And that's usually in the URL. Now, if you click, once you say next on the slide, we're going to go to the same slide, but you notice that the graphic is going to change. So this is what we usually use right here. Nowadays, you don't even see the .php or anything like that. You see the top level domain name, and then it just basically goes into paths. These paths are folders that are created there, and they allow you to access website information. We've moved quite a bit away. You can see there that 7's an anchor, that sign is an HTML anchor, and jump to someplace into some information. So we've changed, and this will continue to change in your URL as time goes on. The internet basically has a couple ways to search. There's many ways, but the two we're going to talk about is a search engine, basically like database systems set up by Google. Or you can do a subdirectory search. You know, Google used to have it, but they don't have it anymore. But Yahoo, as you see in the image there, somebody has to review each document, and they put them into categories, so you can then click arts and humanities, and then in arts and humanities you go farther and farther and farther. So it's kind of a manual search based upon categories is your subject directory, where the search engine basically access keywords and characteristics that you type in from the search engine box. first type of main graphic that's used on the internet is a GIF, graphic interface format, basically, or interchange, sorry. It's comprised of colors of 256. That's the max. GIFs are not great for pictures or photos, but like CartoonWorks, line art, they do something special. They will do, as you see, that 3D tilt that's supposed to represent the transparent backgrounds, and they do animations. So some of the main cool things that you can, and why GIFs are still existent right now, is you can lay something over the top on a web page, and the background, the white background color, will disappear, so it looks like it's seamless instead of a bunch of boxes. As well as you can do animations like you see there, you see on this page with the little balls going back and forth. So those are the main reasons why we still use them today. JPEGs, okay, are the ones that we use for photos. You see that there's different resolutions. If there's not enough DPI, or dots per inch, or resolution there, the higher the resolution, the bigger the file size, you get very blurry or jaggy images. But as we go through there, you see the middle picture, there's still some blurriness. There's not a lot of details on the edges, but then you go to the last picture, it's really nice. They're lossless in compression. They're really neat, but they do not do transparencies in the background. So those little gray areas around the girls, the background, you'd have to put it into a square background or make the background work. It wouldn't be able to disappear. As well as there's no animation, but they're wonderful for pictures. The next type of image format we're going to be talking about is PNG. Basically, it's the newest to the block. They can do compression, lossless compression, just like a JPEG, but they can also do like GIF characteristics of small supported 256 colors for cartoon work. It's really nice. You do photography. I'm not aware that they do animation, but they do transparencies, as you see the 3D tilt. You can drop the background completely out and go from there. Where would we be today without streaming video or audio? You have that in Netflix and a lot of other these on-demand movies and sound shows that you can buy subscriptions to. It's the ability to watch something or listen to something and continually have it download. So what it does is it starts, so it gets about a 2-minute head start, downloads 2 minutes, and you start watching it, and then everything else catches up as you're watching it, hopefully. Sometimes you might see Netflix, or if you're listening to streaming audio on the radio or on your computer, it stops for a second, catches up, and then it starts playing again. That's the ability to stream data without having to wait, because in the old days we had to wait to download everything. Wait, then watch. Well, we found out that you're too impatient and I'm too impatient to do that, and we invented streaming. Browser plugins are things that you can add to your browser, and we're noticing now if you use Chrome, like Java has been disabled. You're seeing that Flash is kind of there but not. The only plugin that we're really still using a lot or accessing is probably Adobe Acrobat Reader. There might be a couple others for movies, but it's an extra that you add in. It's an extra component that, sometimes the browsers say no because they're risks, meaning there's holes in them that hackers can utilize to take control of your computer or plant something. Phishing basically is acting like a company and asking you for your own information. So let's say your bank sends you an email saying, hey, you're overdrawn, click here to log in and check to make sure or to pay your bill. You click on it, it looks like your website, it's not. You type your password and username in, they collect that information, and then they forward you, without you knowing, back to your regular website. You think, oh, must have typed the wrong information in. And you do it again and you get in. You don't think about it. But in the meantime, they have your username and password because the first site you went to that looked like Wells Fargo was just a collection agency. So what I'd always suggest, you can see a video here as we go down, is always go directly. Do not click on links in your email. Go directly to the website, type it in, and then log in and check it out. You see here on the graphic here, 91% of cyber attacks begin with phishing. A lot of military information, that's how they get in. You'll notice that Sony scandal started with an email that got in, and then it started infecting and doing a lot of other stuff. And you'll learn more about it as we go here. It's very important, especially on email, that you check everything. You see here it has you checking your domain name. If it's not the right domain name or sounds suspicious, you got a problem. In the from area, they says Gmail. Most corporations aren't going to use their Gmail account. Toll-free numbers, I'd call it if you're concerned. Again, check the links. Put your mouse over the top and check it. The funny thing is there's also spelling errors and stuff in there. I'm just always cautious of email. Even if it is coming from my bank, I just log right in and then check it from inside my login. I don't click on a link. E-commerce, or basically a transaction done online through a business or a private owner, is considered the gold mine of our time. Basically, everybody's running to put stuff online to sell it because I think it's going to go quickly. The people who are really making money are like the PayPals who are managing your account, the Yahoo that you might add in, or the eBays. You can make a nice profit if you have a niche market, but most likely people aren't aware of how much time you have to put in to basically create a good living in an online e-commerce environment. If you look at the graphic, it's really pretty, it's a good example of what you have to go through an online store. You know, there's marketing, there's payment solutions, there's customer order fulfillment and management and shipping and freight and customer support. It's a big deal. I work with companies, and that's what I do. I help them go e-commerce, and a lot of them don't have a clue of distribution points, the cost involved, the marketing. You just got to get in your mind that, hey, I want to go and make a online business. If you put it up, people are going to pay billions of dollars. That's not how it works. You've got to put a lot of time, and there's a lot of growth and a lot of steps involved in it. There's 4 basic types of e-commerce out there, categories. There's B2B, B2C, C2B, and C2C. Okay, if you look at these, it's basically the B stands for business and the C stands for consumer. Business to business, at our college, we employ Office Max. So if we need anything, we don't have a supply cabinet. Our administrative secretaries will get in there and they'll type, we need dry erasers or whatever, and all of a sudden a car will pull up and then we get them. So that's a good example of B2B. Amazon is a good example of business to consumer. Basically, they're providing you something that you would want. Consumer to business, That's more of a new area. Okay, it's basically a set up a budget online. Companies bid on your project. Consumers. I have not dealt with the consumer to business as much, but it does exist. Consumer to consumer would be an example. A good example is Craigslist. It's basically the consumer taking their sales in their own hand and getting things done. FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, is basically the opposite of HTTP that you put in your URL when you're going to a website. Instead of going to a website, FTP will transfer something to you. So if you think about uploading things, like when you upload things to your Dropbox or your Google Cloud, okay, that is the uploading process, and FTP is what permits those things to happen. Many operating systems have FTP built in. An FTP server is a computer that allows users to upload and download files, much like the cloud systems that we have right now. There's G Drive, there's Dropboxes, there's a lot. And so remember, when you're downloading, that's one thing. But when you're uploading, you're using FTP.